Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets video in Practical Sheets. Today we are going to create a little app script project where we're going to replace the import range. I'm going to tell you that the import range is not the best formula there is. Actually, it's really nice, but when you start having a lot of data or when you start having a lot of import ranges in the same sheet, then you can begin to have some problems. And I know a lot of you have had them. So what I'm going to show you is two methods where we can replace the import range with a macro, with a code. So you can bring data from other side and you can update it frequently, but without having to depend on the import range function. That again, it's a very nice function, but it has its limitations. So before we dive right into it, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to download the template, just go to the Patreon page and you can do it immediately. So without further ado, let's begin. The first thing we're going to do is, I assume you already know how import range works, but I'm going to do a quick import range so you know. I have my page where I'm going to paste or bring the data, and I have my origin sheet where I have the data I'm going to pull. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy all of the URL of the source sheet. I'm going to copy it, and here I'm going to start writing import range, and then in quotation marks I'm going to paste the whole URL. Then I'm going to write comma, and then I need to paste the name of the sheet. In this case the sheet is called data, and the range. In this case the range will be A up to, let's leave it D21. So I'm going to copy this, and here I'm going to write data, exclamation sign, and paste my range. Close the quotation marks and close the parentheses. The first time it's going to ask me for authorization. It's very important that you are the owner or you have permission to both sheets, especially to the origin sheet, but I have a video referring to these errors and tips. So let's allow the access. Very important to know that for what we're going to do next, that you can do this with the whole URL or just with the ID. I could have this ID here without all of the other things. So we have a more compact formula, and hit enter and it will still work. Okay. And the other thing important to know is that you could leave this open without the 21. Why would you do this? To make sure that if your data is changing dynamically, if I'm going to be adding new data, let's say here I add a new data called Tableau, whatever. So here automatically it brings Tableau. It's updating automatically. Okay, what's the problem with import range? There are two main issues. One is when you have a lot of data. So if you have a lot of rows, I think that more than 15,000 or 20,000, it starts to crash. So it's not the best solution. There are some ways of solving it, but I don't know if it's the best to use a lot of import range. This is the first thing. The second thing is that not always it's so automatic. Sometimes it takes time in refreshing. It won't refresh automatically each time. Sometimes you have to wait. And the third thing is that when you have a lot of import range in the same sheet, it will make the sheet a bit more heavy. It takes a while to load. And if you have a chain of import range, for example, you import range from one sheet to the next one, and this one then goes to another import range, and then this one goes to another import range, then you may have some errors in the line because one doesn't refresh correctly and it damages the whole chain. Okay, so import range is a very nice function, but you need to be very careful with these issues. So what I'm going to show you today is two ways of working with the import range, but not so much. The first we're going to do is that we're going to put this import range programmatically with Google Apps Script. So we're going to put the import range, then we're going to paste it as a value so that we may work easier. One of the other problems of import range is that if I start putting data here on my right, then if something changes in the import range, for example, the order, then it will damage whatever manual things I put. Let's say I, for example, put here the number 1. Okay, so Google Sheets function sum is my number 1. But if here I add a new row above, and then I see here what happens, the 1 will still be in this row and everything is damaged because I wanted this one to be here. Okay, so these are the main problems that happen when we start mixing our import ranges with manual data and such. So let's delete this row again and go here. So the first method is just to create this formula from Google Apps Script. It's not complicated. Let's go to extensions, Apps Script. We will call this import range values. What it means is that it's going to do the import range and then paste it as values. Very simple. So first, as always, we connect with the Google Sheet. This we do it with get sheet by ID. Sorry, get active spreadsheet. This will be our spreadsheet. For brevity, normally this is called SS. Okay, this could be a constant or this could be a let. Given that it's never going to change, the spreadsheet will always be the same. Constant could work. So semicolon if you want. It's not mandatory, but it makes it more readable. Then we're going to call our worksheet or our specific sheet. In this case, the specific sheet is this one. We only have one, so it could also be the active one, but let's be a bit more robust and say that this will be the sheet, because in your cases, maybe you have a lot of sheets. We can call this IR for import range. And we're going to say to my SS, we're going to call the method get sheet by name. And the name will be IR, import range. Okay, now I have my book or my spreadsheet, and then I have my sheet or my worksheet. In this worksheet, I need to stand on cell A1. So let's say ws.getRange. The range I need is A1. Actually, I'm not standing, because if I would stand, I would say active cell, but I don't need to make it active. I'm just going to say, hey, call A1. And in this A1, what I'm going to do is set the formula. And the formula I'm going to set is this one. The problem is that I have here double quotation marks, and here I also have double quotation marks in my formula. So one thing we could do is to change this for single quotation marks, and then we solve it. So the whole formula will be in single quotation marks. So in this particular formula of import range that I also use double quotations, it works without a problem. So that's it, nothing more. Let's save. I'm going to erase my import range. I'm going to run it. It's going to ask for some permissions. Let's click review permissions. Let's click in our account if we have more than one. Let's go to advanced. Let's say go to untitled project. Here it says Google hasn't verified this app, but it will always say that, so don't worry about it. Click allow. And let's go. Let's see here, it just updated the import range. So you say, well, what's the big difference between having it always and put it by formula? For now, there's no difference. But what I could do is then take all of this range and then paste it again as a value. So now I don't need the formula. So only when I run, it gets the import range, then it copies and pastes it as a value, and that's it. We don't need the import range anymore. And then I can decide how often do I want to call the import range. Maybe once a day, maybe when the file is opened. So let's try to do it. What I'm going to do is, once I set the formula, let's see if this is fast enough. Once I set the formula, I'm going to try to copy all the data that the formula brought. Okay, so in this case, it would be A1 up to D22. So let's try to do it. Let's go again to ws.getRange, A1, D22. We're going to get the values that the formula had. Let's store this in a variable called values if you want to be very original. And then we're going to put this value in the same range. So again, ws.getRange, A1, D22, and we're going to set the values for these values. We're just replacing the formula for values. We can do this in other number of ways, but this should work. Let's see. Here we have the import range. Now let's run it again to see what happens. Now you can see that we don't have the import range, but just to see if this is quick enough, I'm going to delete the import range. Actually, I'm going to delete the whole range. And again, let's run it. So apparently it worked. So it does the import range, then it copies the value that the import range brought, then it pastes them as a value. Okay. I don't know if you have a big database, and then you can tell me in the comments if this is not fast enough, and then maybe it cannot paste the values quickly enough, because sometimes the import range will have some delay. So this, I'll leave it to you in the comments. If any of you have this problem, just let me know and we will see how we can fix this. Maybe putting a flush, maybe putting a try, maybe putting a sleep. There are a number of ways we can try to do it. The last thing is that this will not always be A1 D22. So one possibility is to change this for data range. And this we can also change this for get data range. Okay. Let's save this and let's run it again. Okay, so here I have a problem. Let's see. I don't know what happened. Again, I'm going to erase all this and run it again. So it works again. If I run it again, I have a problem, and the problem is that this is values, and when it tries to paste the import range over this, it will say I cannot paste it because this is values. Before doing all of this, I need to clear the content of the sheet. So what I can do is, before even setting the formula, I could say ws dot get range, and the range will be all the columns and all the rows. So from row number 1 and column number 1 up to the last row, that will be get max rows, and to the last column, that it will be ws dot get max calls or get max columns. And to this range, I'm going to say clear content. So it erases everything before doing the import range. So let's save it and let's run it again. First, I'm going to delete this. Actually, I'm going to leave it like this to try it out. So it erases, then puts the import range, then it pastes the value. Let's run it again, and we don't have a problem. The only problem we may have is that if we have some columns here, for example, I have some formulas that I wanted to do to this data, then it will also erase them and put them as values. So maybe I don't want this. So if you don't want this, then we can go back to our get range and put it as we want. For example, here I'm going to say, let's start in row number 1. Yes, perfect. Let's go up to the last row that you can find. So this would be, well, first, before that, let's begin in column number 1 also. Excellent. But you could change this, start in column number 2 or number 3 or whatever. So I think this is more flexible than doing get data range. Again, comma, to up until which row do we want is the last row that we have. So this we can get it with ws dot get last row. You have to be careful, because if you have formulas with array formula, or if you have checkboxes, then this get last row may give you an error, and you will need to have a specific formula for this that I will do in a separate video. Okay. And for the columns, here is where you can do it manually. So we can say that it will be 4 columns, sorry, comma 4. And this will be the same range that we're going to put down here. So maybe what we could do is add another variable or another constant that is called range, and we can paste all of these, so I don't have to paste it 2 times or change it 2 times. And here this will be range, and here it will also be range. Let's see if this works. Let's save. I'm going to put any formula here. For example, I'm going to concatenate these 2. And let's run it again. So I have another problem, is that given that I did the clear content thing, I'm also erasing the whole formula. Okay, so what I could do is, instead of here going to all the clear content, what I could do is something similar. If I know that always I'm going to have 4 columns, so I could do the same thing up here, but be very, very careful. Why? Because I'm going to cut this and paste it here. So right now our range is going to be up until line 22. Yeah, get last row. Perfect. So this is range, and here, instead of the clear, I'm not going to do it with the get max rows and all that, but just with range. Okay, sorry, this one. Perfect. But then the thing is that once I do my import range, then this range may have changed, because maybe my origin or my source data now doesn't have 22 but 20, or maybe 40, you know. So let's change this for other thing, Power BI. So what I need to do is to set the range again. So do this line again, and because I need to recalculate this last row. Okay, let's save this. Remember, I have my formula here, and I'm going to run it again. I have an error, assignment to constant variable. Okay, so this is where you change this const for let. Let's save, and let's run it one more time. Now let's see, and you can see here that my formula is safe, that I have the new rows, and that this is, it started like an import range, but now it's values. So the final thing you need to decide is how are you going to execute this function. You don't want to come every time and run it from here. So one possibility is to have it as a menu here, and you run it every time. The other possibility is that this runs every time the file is opened. The other possibility is that you can do a trigger that every day at 6 a.m. it runs. For now, I'm going to leave you the open one that I think would work very nicely, but you can ask me in the comments how to do the other ones. So let's do, actually I'm going to leave the unopened one. It's very easy because we're just going to create the unopened trigger. It has to be called exactly unopened with the open in uppercase. And here I'm just going to paste this. So to try it out, I'm going to put another thing. Actually, I'm going to delete these two, Tableau and Power BI, and I'm going to refresh my sheet as if I open it again. Here you can see the whole process. If you pause the video, you can see that it first was import range and then it changed to values, and here I can see that I no longer have Power BI or Tableau, and my formulas are being respected. Okay, so this is the first possibility. The second possibility, let's go to extensions, AppScript one more time, and in my triggers, I'm going to create a time trigger. So let's add the trigger, and it will be my import range values, and I'm going to say it's not from a spreadsheet but time driven, and it could be an hour timer, a day timer, a week timer, a month timer, or just one specific date. So we're going to say hour timer, and we're going to say that every hour. So I know that every hour my import range is going to update. So this gives me a lot more control about the import range, and I can control that the import range is not updating automatically when I want. There's another way of doing this. Let's say the other way of doing it is not using import range. So let's go to our editor, and what we could do is, instead of using the import range, I'm going to have a new function that we will call import values, not import range value, but import values. We're going to simulate what the formula import range does. So this is the same. We get the range, we clear the content, but instead of doing the set formula, we're going to take this ID and do the import range ourselves without using the formula. So for that, we need to connect to another spreadsheet, to this spreadsheet. Okay, so if you want, we can change the name of this SS, rename symbol. We are going to call it Destiny SS. And this will be our Destiny WS. And now we're going to create an origin or a source SS. So source SS, it will be spreadsheet up, but now not get active spreadsheet, but open by ID or by URL, whatever you prefer. Now that we're working with URL, with IDs, so let's just paste. Let's paste our URL, our ID, sorry, and then we're going to do source WS, and it will be source SS dot get sheet by name, and the name is data. Okay, so now I don't need this. I actually can erase this part. The first thing we need to do, we're going to change a couple of things here. The first thing is that the range that we clear the content, this, let's call this source range, Destiny range. Okay, this is the range that currently I have here in my Destiny sheet where the import range goes. And I'm going to clear the content. This is perfect. But here, this is another variable, another different variable. So let's define a new variable that is called source range. And the source range will be our source WS, and we're going to get the range 1, 1, perfect, but the last row is not from the Destiny WS, but our source WS. 4 columns, if that is what you have decided, perfect. Then the values will be range get values, actually source range get values. And finally, I'm going to do the Destiny range. I need to update it because we don't know if the rows, particularly the rows, have changed in my source. So I'm going to copy this, paste this here, below here, and we're going to say, okay, the Destiny range now will be Destiny WS, perfect. Get range, let's start in 1, row 1, column 1, perfect. But now this won't be Destiny get last row, but source get last row. And that's it. Then we set the values, and I think this should work fine. So let's save, and let's do it again. I'm going to add again here Tableau, Power BI. So we choose import range values. Let's run it, see if we have any problem. Let's see here, and you can see that I did the same I did with the import range, but without calling the import range. So at the beginning of the video, I told you that import range has some problems. So if we don't do it with import range, well, we solve some of the problems that import range has. So we are not depending on import range. So I think this is a better method, but I leave it both to you and you can choose which works better for you. Okay, so this is it. I hope you have liked it, and any question you may have or any extension you want to do this or move this forward, let me know. I can help you, especially if you're in the Patreon page. I can help you with specific questions, and you can download the template, of course. See you next time, and I cannot leave the videos without thanking all my Patreons, because this is only possible because of them. Continue creating these videos. So thank you so much, and see you next time.